what's up everybody? True Boxing here. Thank you for coming back to Get Hit with the Truth. So today I'm doing the mid-year champions report, where we're going over all the governing bodies titles from 122 pounds all the way to heavyweight. That's 12 divisions, the divisions that I cover. And today we're going to look at the WBA championship, the main world title, or super championship as it's referred to. As the WBA continues to consolidate down to one champion per division. They currently, between the 12 divisions that I'm covering, they still have 7 of those regular titles, secondary champions, but they are trying to consolidate down to one main champion. But we still have 12 divisions that have a main world title overall. So let's jump in. We're going to start at 122, move to heavyweight, and give you updates on all the belts and the title holders and what could be happening in the second half of the year, what they got coming up. We start with the 122-pound super bantamweight title, which is currently held by the undefeated, reigning, and unified champion Marajan Akhmadaliev, known as MJ. He entered the year as a unified champ and had a mandatory title defense against Ronnie Rios lined up in June. It finally came to fruition, and he went in there, injured a hand, but broke down the veteran Ronnie Rios, the always tough veteran, broke him down, stopped him in the 12th and final round of a fight that he was winning and he was injured in. He went after the knockout and he got it. Body shots were his best friend as he stopped Ronnie Rios to retain his unified belts. Now, the fight that everybody wants to see is MJ versus Stephen Fulton Jr. for the undisputed title. Stephen Fulton holds the WBC and WBO belts, and MJ holds the other 2 titles. So, in the time of the undisputed right now, this is a big time fight if it can be made. Now, Eddie Hearn, MJ's promoter, came out and said that there is nothing that is standing in the way of undisputed. So that means it's up to the promoters. Now, I was under the understanding that Akhmadaliev has 2 mandatories due: Azat Havanasian, the #1 contender, former world title challenger for the WBA, or Marlon Tapales of the IBF. But those governing bodies might be willing to allow an undisputed title fight to happen, or else Eddie Hearn might not have said that. So what does that mean? That means that if the promoters can come together to make this fight, we could be seeing an undisputed title fight in the second half of the year. If we do not, then I think MJ's probably going to fight one of those 2, Havanasian or Marlon Tapales, before the year is over. So hopefully we can get undisputed signed off. We'll see what happens. Next, 126 pounds featherweight. The title there is held by Leo Santa Cruz. He's been champion since February of 2019. He hasn't defended the title since February of 2019. He's held the title longer than that, but he moved up to 130. Earlier this year, he returned from the knockout loss to Gervonta Davis in 2020 and got a win, but that was above 126 pounds. He is signed on for a mandatory title defense against regular champion Lee Wood to consolidate the featherweight title down to 1 champion, but they are still trying to make that fight happen. The last I read was that the 2 sides still want to make the fight, and they're pushing to make the fight. So it's a mandatory fight. If Santa Cruz does not take the fight with Lee Wood, then he vacates and Lee Wood becomes our champion. So we'll see what happens. That's what's going on. I'm hoping that fight gets announced soon. If it does, I think Santa Cruz wins, but I think it's going to be a tough one for him because Lee Wood is a closer. So we'll see what happens. 130 pounds, super featherweight. The champion there is Roger Gutierrez. He hasn't yet fought this year. He was supposed to fight Chris Colbert in February. He had to back out with an injury. Colbert went on to lose to Hector Luis Garcia, and Garcia dominated Colbert over 12 rounds and became the '1 contender for Gutierrez. And now Gutierrez was supposed to be fighting Saturday, July 9th against Garcia in a mandatory defense, but the fight had to be moved, so it's currently not scheduled. So we gotta wait and see, but it looks like Gutierrez is gonna fight Garcia. I think that's anybody's fight. I'm picking the younger undefeated Garcia, but I wouldn't be surprised if the veteran Gutierrez pulled out the win and stayed champion. We'll see what happens, but that fight is going down at some point and some point soon. 135 lightweight, the champion there is the undefeated and undisputed champion, Devin Haney. Haney took the title from George Kambosos Jr. in June. He went to Australia, dominated Kambosos over 12 rounds, and captured the undisputed championship with that win. Now, second half of the year, Haney has a mandatory rematch clause with George Kambosos, so they will be locking horns again before the year is over, probably November, December. I think Haney's going to beat Kambosos again and stay undisputed champion, so we'll see what happens, but that's what's going on with the lightweight title. 140, junior welterweight. Josh Taylor entered the year as champion, as the undisputed champion, but he gave up the WBA belt because they ordered him to fight Albert Puello, but he was already in negotiations with Jose Zepeda, who he's going to fight next. And there was some miscommunication about how they were going to allow the mandatories to wait and to line up one at a time to keep an undisputed champion with all 4 belts, but that didn't happen, so the belt is currently vacant, and Albert Puello, undefeated contender, has been ordered to fight Batir Akhmedov in a mandatory fight for the vacant belt. The winner of that has to fight Ishmael Barroso. So we're just waiting around for Puello and Akhmedov to have to fight each other, and that fight will come in the second half of the year. Neither of these guys really have done much, so it's anybody's ball game for the 140-pound title for the WBA and who's going to be the champ. 147 welterweight. Errol Spence Jr. is the WBA and unified world champion. Yordenis Ugas entered the year as champ, but he signed on for a unification bout with Errol Spence in April, and Errol Spence beat down Yordenis Ugas, the Manny Pacquiao conqueror. He absolutely dominated him over 10 rounds, beat him up to where Ugas had to, they stopped the fight. He was badly bruised and his face swollen. Dominant performance by Errol Spence as he becomes a 3-belt champion. And now it's looking for the second half of the year. It's looking like Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford are going to be locking horns for the undisputed welterweight championship of the world in a mega fight right there. The fight has not yet been finalized, but for all intents and purposes, this fight looks like it's going to happen. So hopefully that's the case. If it does happen, I got Terrence Crawford beating Errol Spence and becoming the undisputed champion. And it all could happen before the end of the year. So we'll see what goes down, but that is what looks like it's going to happen next for the WBA title at 147. 154 super welterweight. The champion there is Jermell Charlo. He's also the undisputed champion now. He entered the year with 3 of the 4 belts, and he locked horns with Brian Castano, and who was the WBO champion at the time, in a rematch from their fight last year that ended in a controversial draw. This time it was decisive. Charlo went out there and got, he was getting outlanded, but he was landing the better and harder shots and timing his punches and hurting Castano, and he finally hurt him badly and finished him in the 10th round of that fight and became the undisputed champion. Huge win for him right there. Next up for him is likely he's going to make a WBO mandatory defense against undefeated #1 contender Tim Tszyu. So that looks like what's going to happen next. He's going to defend all 4 belts against Tim Tszyu in his next fight, and then after that we don't know, but we don't have a date yet. That just looks like what's going to go down most likely, so we'll see. 160 middleweight. The champion there is Triple G Gennady Golovkin. Ryota Murata of Japan entered the year as champion. In April, he decided to unify belts against Triple G, who was the IBF champ. It was a very competitive bout the first 4 or 5 rounds, but then Triple G just took over, picking apart Ryota Murata, dominated him and broke him down and stopped him in the 9th round to unify belts. So Triple G is our champion. But Triple G is moving up to 168 to challenge for the undisputed title against Canelo Alvarez at super middleweight. So we are not likely going to see a title fight before the end of the year for the middleweight championship, but we still might. You know, and the reason I say we still might is because if Triple G decides to give up that belt, or the WBA orders him to fight regular champion Erislandy Lara and he refuses, he could get stripped before the end of the year, and Erislandy Lara could be defending his title, or could be upgraded to full champion and get a title defense in before the end of the year. So we'll see what goes down. I personally feel that Triple G is going to lose to Canelo and move back down to 160, and he'll likely sign on to fight Lara in a title defense over his IBF mandatory Esquiva Falchao, because Lara is well known and he has a name. But that's just me. We'll see what goes down. 168, the WBA and undisputed champion is Canelo Alvarez. Alvarez did not defend the title in the first half of the year. He moved up to 175 and went for the title against Dimitri Bivol and came up short, losing by a unanimous decision. But he signed a 2-fight deal, and the second fight was a trilogy fight with Triple G Gennady Golovkin, the current unified middleweight champion of the world. So Canelo will defend his WBA and undisputed world title on September 17th on DAZN pay-per-view against Triple G in a third fight. I personally feel Canelo's going to break down Triple G and stop him, or defeat him decisively over 12 rounds and retain his undisputed title. But we'll see what happens. Triple G's a tough old fighter, and he could still mix it up with the best of them. And he's still the only guy outside of Floyd Mayweather and Dimitri Bivol now that have given Canelo a true run for the money over 12 rounds. So next up is the 175-pound light heavyweight title, which is currently held by the undefeated and reigning champion Dimitri Bivol. He entered the year as champ, and in May he had the biggest fight of his career against undisputed super middleweight champion and then pound for pound king Canelo Alvarez. And Bivol did not disappoint. He went in as a dangerous opponent, and he walked away still champion with the biggest win under his belt intact. A hard-fought but deserving 12-round unanimous decision as he retained his belt. Now, second half of the year, Canelo passed on an immediate rematch to fight Triple G a third time. Right now, it looks like Bivol, there's two options. He's either going to fight Joshua Buatsi in the second half of the year while he awaits a potential rematch with Canelo in the spring of next year, or he's going to take on undefeated top contender and former super middleweight champion Gilberto Ramirez. I'm waiting to see what it is. I'm leaning towards it's probably going to be Buatsi because he's with Eddie Hearn, and I think the WBA will grant him that defense, but we'll see what happens. But either one, I think Bivol beats Gilberto Ramirez. I just think that's a tougher test, but I believe he decisively defeats Joshua Buatsi. So we'll see what goes down. Next up is the 200-pound cruiserweight title, which is currently held by undefeated super champion Arsen Goulamirian. He entered the year as champion. Only talks we've heard is about him possibly fighting an English fighter, but that's all it's been, is talks. He has been out of action now since December of 2019, of over 2.5 years. So I am dying for them to order him to fight somebody. I want to see him defend the title against somebody. Personally, I want to see him defend against Junior Dorticos, but I believe they're going to grant him an optional defense first, or he might face Igorgov next, who was supposed to be a mandatory defense prior. So we'll see what goes down, but I'm hoping we hear something on Goulamirian soon. If not, they need to strip him, because over 2.5 years out of the ring is bullshit. So we'll see what happens. And finally, the WBA heavyweight title is currently held by unified champion Oleksandr Usyk. Usyk holds the WBA, WBO, and IBF titles. He entered the year as champion, and he has an immediate rematch coming up on August 20th against former two-time unified champion Anthony Joshua. Big time fight right there in the heavyweight division. I can't wait to see these two guys lock horns. I think it's going to be fun to watch. Personally, I'm picking Anthony Joshua to defeat Alexander Usyk in their rematch and regain the unified title for a third time. But we'll see. It definitely could go either way. Saturday, August 20th on DAZN. It's going to be fun to see what happens. And then maybe, I don't know if it could happen, depends on the result, maybe we could see an undisputed title fight between Joshua and Fury before the end of the year. I doubt it. I don't think that's enough recovery time and time to promote the fight, but I'm not completely going to rule it out. So that's what I got. That's the mid-year.
Take exit 205 for Fraser Mountain Park Road.
That's the mid-year champions report for the WBA world title from 122 pounds all the way to heavyweight. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, smash the like button, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. I appreciate any and all support. This is True Boxing. You've been hit with the truth.